In the darkness of your screen, another nightmare awaits. Welcome to Void of Fears. We've conquered 10K, but the shadows grow hungry for more. Our journey to 100K subscribers has begun. Every like feeds the algorithm. Every comment summons new victims. Every subscription strengthens what we're building here. Join us. Shape our future. The Void has room for all. Now, let's dive into tonight's story. July 18th, 1972. Deep Space Monitoring Station, Wyoming. Static crackled through the monitoring station speakers as Dr. Eleanor Wells adjusted the radio telescope's frequency. The graveyard shift had been uneventful until 3 hours ago, when an unusual pattern emerged from the background noise of space. A signal originating from beyond Neptune's orbit. "Are you getting this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her colleague, Dr. Raymond Foster, nodded slowly as he stared at the printout. It's structured. Too structured to be natural. He pointed to the regular intervals in the waveform. "Look at this precision. It's almost like it's counting." Eleanor felt a chill despite the warmth of the monitoring room. Counting to what? The pattern repeated every 17 seconds, a series of pulses and pauses that defied random distribution. By morning, they had dubbed it the Ashen Wave for its peculiar ability to dampen surrounding frequencies, creating dead zones in the electromagnetic spectrum. "Whatever it is, it's eating other signals," said Dr. Victor Harmon, the station director, summoned from his bed at 5 a.m. His finger traced the printout where background cosmic radiation simply vanished around the pattern. "I've never seen anything like this." "Could it be the Russians?" Foster suggested, voicing the ever-present Cold War anxiety. Harmon shook his head. "Not unless they've developed technology 50 years ahead of ours. This signal is coming from the outer reaches of our solar system, beyond Neptune." "So, what are we talking about?" Eleanor asked. Not to state the obvious, but extraterrestrial? The word hung heavy in the air. Harmon's face was grim as he reached for the secure phone line. "Get me NORAD." Within 48 hours, the station was swarming with government officials. Scientists from various agencies worked around the clock to analyze the signal, while military personnel maintained tight security. "The signal appears to be directed," announced Dr. Lydia Novak, an astrophysicist flown in from MIT. "It's aimed specifically at Earth, and the frequency shifts to compensate for our orbital movement." "Someone sent this to us deliberately," Eleanor concluded. "Or something," Foster added quietly. Within a week, the largest classified space recovery mission in history launched quietly from Vandenberg Air Force Base. Using experimental propulsion technology, the craft reached the signal's origin point in half the time conventional rockets would require. The mission communications were sporadic and heavily encrypted. Those with clearance reported that the team had located a perfectly smooth spherical object floating in space, accompanied by no other debris or signs of technology. "It's just sitting there." Captain Jackson's distorted voice came through the communication array. "No visible propulsion, no means of generating the signal we detected. It's just a sphere." "Any markings?" Control asked. "Negative. No markings. No seams. It's perfect. Too perfect." The recovery team reported difficulty approaching the object. Equipment malfunctioned, navigation systems showed impossible readings, and crew members experienced intense migraines and vivid hallucinations. "Jenkins and Ramirez are confined to quarters," Jackson reported on the third day. "They claim the sphere is talking to them." Despite these complications, the team successfully secured the object in a specialized containment unit and began the journey home. During the return voyage, 3 crew members vanished without explanation. The ship's logs showed no breach, no malfunction. They simply disappeared between routine checks. The mission returned 3 months later with its strange cargo. A perfect spherical object, 1.7 meters in diameter, composed of material that absorbed 99.8% of visible light. Preliminary tests revealed nothing about its composition or purpose. Mass spectrometry, radiation testing, sonic imaging all produced contradictory or impossible results. The sphere was designated VARDEN-K and transported to a facility deeper than Area 51 itself, the S4 Blacksite. There, buried beneath layers of security and secrecy, a specialized team was assembled to study it. Initial findings were troubling. Personnel working directly with the sphere reported vivid nightmares. Laboratory animals brought near it became aggressive, then catatonic. Electronic equipment frequently malfunctioned in its presence. Most concerning was its response to observation. Instruments detected a faint vibration, almost like humming, that intensified when humans looked directly at the sphere and ceased entirely when only cameras monitored it. After 6 months of increasingly disturbing incidents, the project director made a fateful decision. VARDEN-K would be sealed away in a specialized containment chamber with minimal direct interaction. Research would continue using remote monitoring only. For 50 years, it remained silent. The original research team retired or died. The Ashen Wave signal ceased. VARDEN-K became a footnote in classified history, an anomaly filed away and forgotten as Cold Wars ended and new threats emerged, until now. Dr. Senna Mire jolted awake, her sheets damp with sweat. The same dream again. A massive structure beneath a dying star, pulsing with terrible purpose. In the dream, something colossal stirred within the structure, something that knew her name. This time, the dream had been more vivid than ever before. She had walked through corridors that twisted in ways that hurt to look at, guided by a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. At the heart of the structure, she had found a chamber with walls of perfect darkness. "You are the key," the voice had whispered. "You will open the way." Senna shuddered, reaching for the glass of water beside her bed. Her hands were trembling. These dreams had plagued her for months now, growing more frequent and detailed with each passing week. She'd tried everything: sleep studies, meditation, even experimental dream suppression medication. Nothing helped. Her phone rang, the display reading 3:17 a.m. Unknown caller. "Dr. Mire speaking," she answered, voice still rough with sleep. "This is Director Haynes, Department of Special Research. We need you at Groom Lake immediately. A car is already on its way." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Senna exhaled slowly, trying to calm her racing heart. The dream still lingered at the edges of her consciousness, details fading with every passing second. Department of Special Research. She'd never heard of it, despite her extensive work with government scientific agencies. And Groom Lake. Everyone knew what that meant. Area 51. Senna moved quickly, throwing essential items into an overnight bag. As she packed, she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles under her eyes, skin pale from too many nights of disrupted sleep. For a moment, she thought she saw something else in the mirror, a shadow standing behind her. But when she turned, she was alone. Just nerves, she told herself, just the dream lingering. 20 minutes later, she was in a black SUV heading toward McCarran Airport. Her credentials in theoretical astrobiology and gravitational anomalies had earned her consulting roles with various government agencies before, but never with this level of urgency. Never in the middle of the night. "Can you tell me anything about why I'm being summoned?" she asked the driver. "I'm just transport, ma'am," he replied without turning. "They don't tell me anything." The night sky was clear, stars painfully bright against the darkness. As she watched them through the window, Senna could swear they were pulsing in a pattern, like the one from her dream. She closed her eyes, but the pattern remained, imprinted on the inside of her eyelids. At McCarran, a military helicopter waited on a private runway. No paperwork, no security checks. Just two men in dark suits who escorted her directly from the car to the aircraft. The helicopter ride from Las Vegas to Groom Lake passed in silence. Two stern-faced agents accompanied her, neither offering conversation. They studied tablets with encrypted displays, occasionally exchanging meaningful glances that made Senna increasingly uncomfortable. "Am I allowed to know who I'll be meeting with?" she tried. "Commander Vell will brief you upon arrival," one agent replied, then returned to his tablet. As the infamous runways of Area 51 came into view, illuminated by rows of blue lights in the pre-dawn darkness, Senna felt a peculiar sensation, like she'd seen this place before, though she knew she hadn't. The layout of the buildings, the pattern of the lights, even the mountain range in the background, all seemed eerily familiar, like from her dreams. Senna gripped the edge of her seat, a cold realization settling in her stomach. Whatever was happening here, it was connected to the nightmares that had haunted her for months. She was being pulled into something that had already reached out to her across time and consciousness. The helicopter touched down, and as its rotors slowed, Senna noted the unusual security presence. Armed personnel positioned at regular intervals, far more than seemed necessary, even for a classified installation. All wore expressions of tightly controlled anxiety. Something had the US military spooked. A man in a pressed military uniform waited on the tarmac as they landed. Despite the spotless appearance of his attire, the man himself looked haggard, dark circles under bloodshot eyes, a nervous twitch in his right hand as he checked his watch. "Dr. Mire, I'm Commander Thorne Vell. Thank you for coming on such short notice." His handshake was firm but clammy. "We don't have much time." "Much time for what exactly?" Senna asked, following him towards a nondescript building. Vell glanced at her, then at his watch again. 6 hours and 23 minutes ago, an object that has been dormant for 50 years suddenly activated. We need to understand why. Inside the building, Vell led her through a series of security checkpoints, each more rigorous than the last. At the final checkpoint, all her personal items were confiscated. Phone, watch, even her hairpin. "Is this really necessary?" she asked, as a security officer ran a scanner over her body for the third time. "Absolutely," Vell replied, not looking up from a security monitor. "What we're about to show you responds to electronic frequencies and to observation." An elevator took them deep underground, far deeper than Senna had expected. According to her internal sense of time, they descended for nearly 17 minutes. When she mentioned this to Vell, he checked his watch with a frown. "Our facility clock says 23 minutes. The time discrepancies have been getting worse." The elevator doors opened to reveal a corridor that seemed to bend at subtle angles that made Senna's eyes strain to follow. The walls were a sterile white, illuminated by recessed lighting that cast no shadows. "Welcome to S4, Vell said, "the deepest black site in American history." The research team gathered in a conference room with walls lined with monitors, displaying various readouts. Tension hung in the air like an electrical charge. "Most of you have been briefed," Vell announced to the assembled scientists and military personnel. "Dr. Mire is joining us as a consultant on the VARDEN-K situation. Dr. Mire, this is the core research team." Introductions followed. Dr. Harlan Crest, communications specialist, with wild eyes and perpetually trembling hands. Lieutenant Isren Vale, head of security, whose youthful appearance seemed at odds with her rank and the deference others showed her, and several other researchers whose specialties ranged from astrophysics to ancient languages. "Time for you to see it," Vell said after the introductions concluded. He led Senna through a series of airlocks to a massive circular chamber. In the center, suspended in a specialized containment field, hovered the perfect black sphere, VARDEN-K. Despite the powerful lights aimed at it from all angles, the sphere seemed to drink in the illumination, reflecting nothing. And it was humming. The sound was barely perceptible, a vibration more felt than heard. As Senna focused her attention on the sphere, the humming intensified slightly. When she glanced away, it diminished. "It responds to direct observation," Vell explained. "We can't monitor it through cameras. When no human eyes are on it, the sphere goes completely silent." "How long has it been doing this?" Senna asked, unable to look away from the perfect blackness. "The humming started 50 years ago when we recovered it, but 6 hours ago it began pulsing." As if on cue, a ripple passed across the sphere's surface. Not a physical movement, but a disturbance in the perfect blackness, like a drop of oil spreading across the water. "That's new," Lieutenant Vell said sharply, stepping forward. "The pulses were approximately 40 minutes apart before..." Vell's face tightened. "They're accelerating." "What happens when the pulses reach zero interval?" Senna asked. No one answered. Back in the monitoring room, Senna reviewed the data collected since VARDEN-K's activation. The pulses followed a clear pattern of acceleration, each one coming slightly sooner than predicted by standard decay curves. "It's almost like it's counting down," she murmured. "That's what we thought," Dr. Kress said, his fingers dancing nervously across a tablet. "But counting down to what?" A monitor behind them flickered. For a split second, it showed an image of a corridor that didn't match any in the facility schematics Senna had been shown. "Did you see that?" she asked. Kress didn't respond, suddenly staring intently at his tablet. "Dr. Mire, you need to see this." He handed her the device, which displayed a live feed from the sphere chamber. The surface of VARDEN-K was rippling continuously now, patterns forming and dissolving in the perfect blackness. "Is there any sound with this feed?" Senna asked. Kress shook his head. "Audio monitoring doesn't work with the sphere, remember? It only hums when directly observed." But as they watched the feed, Senna could swear she heard something. Whispers at the edge of perception, voices speaking words that almost made sense. A technician nearby suddenly began speaking rapidly, in a language Senna didn't recognize. His eyes were wide, unfocused, and sweat beaded on his forehead. "What's he saying?" Vell demanded. "It sounds like Sanskrit," another researcher offered. "But that's impossible. Jenkins doesn't speak Sanskrit." Lieutenant Vell stepped forward, placing a hand on Jenkins' shoulder. "Jenkins, report. What's happening?" The technician's head snapped toward her, his expression clearing momentarily. I don't know. I could suddenly understand something, a language, coming from inside my head." Throughout the facility, similar incidents were reported over the next few hours. Security footage showed glitches, moments where rooms appeared differently containing equipment that wasn't there when physically checked. Radios and intercoms emitted whispers when powered off. Personnel reported dreams of a structure beneath a dead sun, the same dream that had haunted Senna for months. In the center of it all, VARDEN-K pulsed with increasing frequency, its perfect surface occasionally rippling with patterns that strained the eye. 3 days after Senna's arrival, the first disappearance occurred. Dr. Lawrence Palmer vanished from a sealed laboratory while analyzing sphere pulse data. Security footage showed him working at his station one moment, then simply not there the next. No doors had opened, no alarms had triggered. The coffee in his mug was still steaming. "Run it again," Vell ordered, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Frame by frame." The security officer complied, slowing the footage to individual frames. Nothing. One frame showed Palmer typing at his terminal. The next showed an empty chair, still spinning slightly from his sudden absence. "This is impossible," Vell insisted, reviewing the footage for the 12th time. "People don't just vanish." The facility went into immediate lockdown. Every corridor, every room was searched. Air vents, maintenance tunnels, even the plumbing system was examined. Emergency protocols were initiated, checking for radiation leaks, gas releases, or any other environmental hazard that might explain Palmer's disappearance. Nothing. For 38 hours, the search continued, without result. Dr. Palmer's personal effects remained untouched in his quarters. His security badge hadn't been used at any checkpoint. The base's perimeter sensors showed no unauthorized exits. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. Then, just as suddenly, he returned. A technician monitoring the same laboratory gasped as the feed showed Palmer materializing at his workstation. One moment the room was empty. The next, he stood there, as if he'd never left, hands poised over the keyboard, mid-typing. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Security personnel converged on the lab, weapons drawn, uncertain what they were dealing with. They found Palmer confused, irritated at the commotion. "What's going on?" he demanded as medical personnel surrounded him. "Why is everyone looking at me like that?" "Dr. Palmer," Vell said carefully, "you've been missing for over a day and a half." Palmer laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous. I've been right here, working. Everyone else disappeared for a few minutes. Then you all came rushing back in here acting crazy." Medical examination revealed disturbing anomalies. Palmer's fingerprints had mirror image whorls, the patterns reversed from his previous records. A childhood appendectomy scar documented in his medical file had vanished, without a trace. Most alarming were the blood tests which showed trace elements not found in the human body, compounds the lab equipment couldn't even identify. Physically, he appears to be Dr. Palmer, the chief medical officer reported to Vell and Senna. DNA is a 99.7% match, within the margin of error for our testing equipment, but there are discrepancies. "What kind of discrepancies?" Senna asked. The doctor hesitated. His brain activity shows unusual patterns. Portions of his cerebellum are lighting up that normally shouldn't be active in humans, and his core body temperature is nearly 2 degrees lower than normal human baseline. "Is he dangerous?" Vell asked bluntly. "Unknown. But I'd recommend keeping him under observation. Something happened to him during those missing hours." Palmer was confined to a medical isolation unit, monitored around the clock. He maintained his story, that from his perspective everyone else had vanished briefly. He became increasingly agitated when questioned about what he might have experienced, insisting that nothing unusual had occurred. "All I know is I was working on the pulse frequency analysis, and suddenly everyone was gone," he repeated during Senna's interview with him. "The monitors went dark, the lab was silent. Then about 5 minutes later, everyone rushed back in like a SWAT team. That's all." But Senna noticed subtle differences in his behavior. His speech cadence had changed slightly. He held himself differently, and occasionally when he thought no one was watching, his eyes would track movement that wasn't there. The incident shattered what remained of the team's composure. Paranoia spread through S4 like a virus. Personnel began traveling in pairs. Unwilling to be alone, some refused to sleep, convinced they might wake up changed, or not wake up at all. More disturbing incidents followed. A security officer reported seeing a duplicate of herself patrolling a corridor she hadn't been assigned to. A lab technician discovered that data he had collected yesterday now showed completely different results, though the timestamps remained unchanged. 3 different people reported hearing whispering coming from air vents, all at the same time, but in different sections of the facility. Senna began documenting the anomalies, searching for patterns. One detail stood out. Many incidents occurred precisely when VARDEN-K emitted its pulses. The strange sphere seemed to be a nexus point for reality distortion that spread outward in waves. She noticed other troubling signs. Clocks throughout the facility showed different times, with discrepancies growing larger by the day. Her watch, returned to her after a thorough examination, ran consistently 6 minutes faster than the facility's main clock, which itself disagreed with the atomic clock in the physics lab. In one particularly unsettling experiment, Senna placed 3 identical digital clocks side by side in the observation room. Within 4 hours, they displayed 3 different times, despite having started in perfect synchronization. Time itself is becoming unstable here, she told Vell during their daily briefing, and the effect is spreading. Commander Vell seemed most affected by the time slippages. His military precision made him particularly sensitive to the temporal dislocations. Senna found him in his office late one night, walls covered with handwritten timelines and calculations. Newspaper clippings, printouts of research papers, and photographs were pinned up in a chaotic web, connected by strings of different colours. Vell barely looked up when she entered, his eyes fever-bright with exhaustion and stress. His normally immaculate uniform was rumpled, and his hand shook slightly as he added another note to his sprawling timeline. "Something's wrong with time here," he said without preamble when she entered. "I've experienced the same Monday 3 times now. Different in small ways, but the same day?" "That's not possible," Senna replied, though her conviction wavered. After what she'd witnessed in the past few days, she was no longer certain of what was possible. 3 days ago, or what should have been 3 days, I spilled coffee on these reports." He held up a stack of papers with a prominent brown stain. "The next morning, clean reports. I spilled coffee again, same spot. Next morning, clean again. It's happened 3 times now." He dropped the papers on his desk and ran a hand through his hair, which had begun to grey noticeably since Senna's arrival. "And it's not just the coffee. Each morning, Dr. Russo asks me the same question about radiation protocols. Each afternoon, the cafeteria serves the same meal. The duty roster resets, and only I seem to notice." Vell turned to one of his walls, where he'd pinned dozens of photographs, security footage stills showing various areas of the facility. "Look at these, all taken supposedly a day apart." Senna examined the images. At first glance, they appeared identical, but on closer inspection she noticed subtle differences. A coffee cup moved slightly, a different researcher in the background, a clipboard held in a left hand instead of a right. "Each cycle, there are variations," Vell continued. "Small things change, but the overall pattern remains the same, and each cycle the changes get more significant, like reality is fraying." He pointed to a series of photos labelled Corridor B7. The first showed a normal hallway with standard government-issue grey walls. The second was similar, but the lighting seemed slightly off. The third showed the same corridor, but the proportions were subtly wrong, the hallway appearing longer, narrower. The fourth... Senna blinked, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The fourth image showed a corridor that bent at angles that shouldn't be possible, with shadows falling in contradictory directions. "That's not a camera malfunction," Vell said quietly. "I walked down that corridor yesterday. It looks exactly like that now." Senna felt her professional skepticism crumbling under the weight of evidence. "The sphere's influence is spreading," she said, "distorting space-time throughout the facility." "Not just distorting," Vell corrected, "rewriting, rebuilding, like it's redesigning our reality according to some other blueprint." He reached for a notebook, flipping to a page filled with what looked like a record of time checks. "I've been tracking the time discrepancies between different sections of the facility. They're not random. There's a pattern, like ripples spreading outward from the sphere chamber. Some areas are running faster, others slower. In the lowest level, near the secondary containment room, I measured a 17-minute difference in just 1 hour of objective time." Senna examined his calculations. "The effect is accelerating." "Yes," Vell agreed grimly, "and it gets worse." He flipped to another page, this one showing a floor plan of S4, with areas marked in different colours. The red sections are where Reality distortions have been reported, visual anomalies, spatial irregularities, auditory hallucinations. 3 days ago, it was just the immediate vicinity of the sphere chamber. Now, nearly half the facility was marked in red. And these, he continued, pointing to areas marked in yellow, are where we've recorded temporal anomalies but no obvious reality distortions. Yet, the yellow covered most of the remaining facility, with only a few sections still unmarked. How long until the entire base is affected? Senna asked. At the current rate of progression, less than 48 hours? Vell closed the notebook with a decisive snap. Whatever's happening, it's building towards something, and I'm afraid we're almost out of time. As if to punctuate his statement, the facility's alarm suddenly blared, red emergency lights casting harsh shadows across Vell's wall of evidence. A voice over the intercom announced, "Alert. Containment field fluctuation detected. All personnel to emergency stations." Vell was already moving toward the door. The sphere chamber, VARDEN-K's pulses must have reached critical frequency. They raced through corridors that seemed slightly longer than they should be, passing personnel who moved with the controlled urgency of well-trained professionals facing the unknown. Senna noticed something disturbing. Some staff members appeared to be moving slightly out of sync with their surroundings, as if they were operating on a different time frame. When they reached the monitoring room adjacent to the sphere chamber, the displays showed VARDEN-K's pulses had reached 1-minute intervals, 6 times faster than when Senna had first arrived. As they rushed to the chamber, they passed a laboratory where researchers were gathered around a new addition to the team, an experimental artificial intelligence system designated Karai 7. Designed to interpret patterns beyond human perception, the AI had been brought in to analyze the sphere's emissions. "We have partial decryption," Dr. Crest announced as Senna and Vell entered. His earlier nervousness had given way to feverish excitement. The pulses, they're a key of some kind. Karai 7 identified structural similarities to a lock and key mechanism. "A key to what?" Vell demanded. The AI's synthetic voice answered, "To a prison. VARDEN-K is not an object. It is a containment system." The room fell silent, the implications hanging in the air like a physical presence. "What is it containing?" Senna finally asked. The displays around Karai 7 flickered, then resolved into patterns, resembling sound waves. The signals indicate 6 distinct entities within the sphere. They appear to be in a dormant state, but are approaching consciousness. "Approaching consciousness," Vell repeated. "What does that mean?" "The entities exist in a state between sleep and wakefulness," the AI explained. "The Ashen Wave that accompanied VARDEN-K's arrival was not a random emission. Analysis indicates it was a recall signal designed to initiate an awakening sequence after a predetermined dormancy period." Lieutenant Vale stepped forward. Her youthful features hardened into a mask of concern. "And what happens when they fully awaken?" The AI paused before responding. "Unknown. But the temporal and spatial anomalies currently experienced throughout the facility suggest their influence extends beyond conventional physical limitations." That night, Senna's dreams were more vivid than ever. She saw the massive structure beneath the dying sun, but this time she was inside it. Corridors stretched in impossible directions, and in the heart of the structure waited 6 thrones. 5 were empty. The 6th held a figure made of darkness and eyes, watching her approach with ancient hunger. She woke, gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. For a disorienting moment, she thought someone else was in her quarters, a figure standing in the corner, watching. But when she turned on the light, she was alone. The next morning, another researcher vanished. Then another. Some return changed, others didn't return at all. After a week at S4, Senna barely recognized the facility. Personnel moved through hallways with vacant expressions or huddled in corners, whispering urgently among themselves. Security footage showed rooms that couldn't exist, and people in two places simultaneously. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. In the AI lab, Carey 7 had made a breakthrough. With Dr. Crest's guidance, it had identified and categorized the 6 entities within VARDEN-K. Entities the researchers now called the Dormant Choir. Each has a distinct signature, Crest explained, his earlier nervous energy now a manic intensity. They affect reality in different ways. The displays showed 6 unique patterns, each labelled with a designation. Saithuram manipulates temporal perception and memory. Velzaesh influences speech and identity. Dremek alters physical structure and form. Oscariel distorts perception of truth and reality. Thraxil controls motion and frozen moments. Kivoth creates reflections and alternate versions. They're not just awakening, Senna realized, staring at the patterns. They're reaching out. The disappearances, the language shifts, the time slippages, each corresponds to one of these entities. Correct, Carey 7 confirmed. Analysis indicates these entities exist partially outside conventional space-time. Their awakening process involves extending their influence into our reality. But what are they? Vell demanded. Aliens? Negative, the AI responded. Historical and mythological pattern matching suggests these entities predate human civilization by millions of years. They may predate Earth itself. Lieutenant Vell, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. They're far older than that. All eyes turned to her. How would you know that? Vell asked, suspicion edging his voice. Vell straightened, her youthful appearance suddenly seeming like a mask over something ancient. Because I was sent to watch over them, to ensure they remained dormant. What are you saying? Senna asked. The civilization that created VARDEN-K left guardians. I am one of them. Vell's voice had changed, becoming deeper, resonant with authority. We take human form, live human lives, but our purpose remains constant, to guard against their awakening. That's impossible, Vell said. You've been at S4 for 17 years, Vell finished, and I was at the original recovery site in 1972, and I was there when they were first imprisoned, longer ago than your species has existed. Before anyone could respond, the facility shook with a tremor that sent equipment crashing to the floor. The lights flickered, then stabilized. The containment field is failing, Vell announced, moving toward the door. We must reinforce it immediately. As they rushed towards the sphere chamber, Senna noticed something horrifying. The corridors were changing as they passed through them. Doorways appeared where none had been before. Rooms overlapped, creating impossible geometries. In one section they passed what appeared to be the same security checkpoint 3 times, though they never backtracked. The sphere chamber itself had transformed. VARDEN-K still hovered at its center, but the perfect blackness now swirled with colors that hurt to look at directly. The containment field crackled with energy, straining against forces it wasn't designed to hold. It's too late, Vell said, her voice hollow. The first is already awakening. As if in response, every screen in the chamber displayed the same pattern. Saithuram's signature. Time slipped. Senna found herself in the same room, but everything had changed. Equipment lay in different positions. Vell's uniform was a slightly different shade, and Dr. Crest was speaking mid-sentence, as if continuing a conversation they'd never started. Must accept that conventional countermeasures are useless, he was saying. We need to consider alternative approaches. What's happening? Senna demanded. Vell turned to her with knowing eyes. Saithuram is awake. Time is fractured now. We're experiencing different moments simultaneously. Another tremor shook the facility, stronger than before. In the sphere chamber, VARDEN-K's surface was no longer solid. It rippled and flowed like liquid darkness. The prison is breaking, Vell said, "and when it does, the choir will be free." The next hours passed in fragments. Reality itself seemed to be coming apart at the seams. Senna would be in mid-conversation with Vell, only to suddenly find herself in a different part of the facility, speaking with someone who claimed they'd been talking for hours. Personnel reported encountering themselves in hallways. Some spoke with voices not their own, reciting words in languages dead for millennia. Others moved with uncanny synchronization, as if controlled by a single mind. VARDEN-K continued its transformation. The perfect sphere became less defined, its edges blurring as it pulsed with increasing intensity. The humming had become a chorus of whispers that everyone heard, even through walls, even in dreams. In what was once the main control room, Commander Vell gathered what remained of the senior staff. His military bearing had crumbled, replaced by the desperate intensity of a man fighting to understand the incomprehensible. "Conventional containment has failed," he announced. "I'm initiating Operation Firebreak. Complete facility, lockdown followed by targeted demolition charges. We'll bury this thing so deep nothing will ever find it." "That won't work," Vell interrupted. "VARDEN-K isn't just a physical object anymore. Destroying this facility won't stop what's happening." "Then what will?" Vell demanded. "A new prison," she replied simply. All eyes turned to Carry 7's main display, where the AI had been running simulations based on the original containment field's design. The choir was imprisoned, using consciousness as a binding agent, the synthetic voice explained. The original prison was created using the combined consciousness of 13 individuals from the civilization that created it. "But they're all gone," Senna said. "Not all," Vell corrected. "I remain. But I alone am not enough." "You're talking about human sacrifice," Vell said, horror evident in his voice. "No," Carry 7 interrupted. "Not sacrifice, transference. The prison requires consciousness as a framework, but not death." The AI's display changed to show brainwave patterns, specifically Senna's. Dr. Mire's neural patterns show a 97.8% resonance with the containment field's base frequency. This is statistically improbable through random chance. Senna felt cold realization wash over her. "My dreams, the structure under the dead sun, I've been connected to this somehow. Before I ever came here." "Yes," Vell confirmed. "You were chosen, marked. Your bloodline has carried the potential for compatibility for generations." Another violent tremor shook the room. Overhead, lights shattered, plunging sections into darkness. Through the observation windows, they could see the sphere chamber. VARDEN-K was now a writhing mass of darkness, tendrils of perfect black extending outward, dissolving everything they touched. Warning klaxons blared throughout the facility. On security monitors, they watched as sections of S4 began to collapse, reality itself seeming to fold inward around the sphere chamber. "We're out of time," Vell said. "Dr. Mire, you must decide." Senna looked around at the terrified faces of the research team, at Vell's stoic resignation, at the monitors showing the facility tearing itself apart. "What happens if I do this?" she asked quietly. "You become the framework for a new prison," Vell explained. "Your consciousness forms the walls that contain the choir." "And I'll die?" "No, but you won't remain as you are now either. You'll exist between, neither fully here nor fully elsewhere." Another explosion rocked the facility. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in bloody red. "Evacuation protocols are active," Vell announced. "All personnel to emergency exits immediately." As the room emptied, Senna remained, staring at the monitors, showing VARDEN-K's transformation. "I'll do it," she said finally. "Tell me how." Vell led her through corridors that twisted in impossible ways, passing rooms that contained multiple versions of the same people, some moving backward, some frozen in mid-motion. They reached a secondary access to the sphere chamber, The main entrance had been consumed by darkness. Inside, VARDEN-K was barely recognizable. The perfect sphere had become a swirling vortex of darkness, with forms that suggested faces, limbs, wings, parts of the awakening choir becoming visible as they pushed against the failing prison walls. At the chamber's edge, Vell prepared a modified version of the containment field controls. "Your consciousness must form a bridge," she explained, "between what they are and what we are. You'll need to hold them inside yourself." "Will I remember who I am?" Senna asked. Vell's ancient eyes held something like compassion. For a time. As the final preparations completed, Commander Vell appeared at the chamber entrance, leading the last evacuation team. "Dr. Mire," he called. "We need to go now." "Get everyone out, Commander," Senna replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'm staying." Vell hesitated, then nodded once. A soldier's acknowledgement of necessary sacrifice. "Godspeed, Doctor." As the evacuation team disappeared down the twisting corridor, Vell activated the modified containment field. Energy surged through the chamber, connecting Senna to the swirling darkness that had been VARDEN-K. Pain unlike anything she'd ever experienced coursed through her body. She felt her consciousness stretching, expanding, encompassing something vast and ancient and hungry. The choir's voices filled her mind. Not 6 voices, but thousands, millions, a cascading chorus of entities that had existed before stars burned. Through the agony, Senna held on to herself, to her name, to her humanity. As the darkness flowed into her, she built walls within her mind, chambers to contain each member of the choir. She felt Sathurm's cold calculation, Velsaic's hungry whispers, Dremek's formless rage, Oscurael's blinding truths, Thraxil's frozen eternity, and Kivoth's mirror self-hatred. But it was too much. 6 ancient consciousnesses, each vast beyond human comprehension, all trying to pour themselves into one human mind. Senna felt herself losing cohesion, her identity beginning to fragment under the overwhelming pressure. "Focus!" Vell's voice cut through the maelstrom. "One at a time, begin with Sci-Therm, let the others wait." With supreme effort, Senna narrowed her attention to the entity that manipulated time. She felt its vast awareness, a consciousness that perceived all moments simultaneously, that could move through time as easily as humans moved through space. It regarded her with ancient curiosity, this tiny fragment of awareness that dared to contain it. Senna pushed back against its influence, carving out a space within herself to hold Sci-Therm without being consumed by it. The pain was excruciating, but slowly, gradually, she felt the entity's resistance weaken. Not from any decrease in its power, but from a growing fascination with her. It wanted to understand this strange, limited being that somehow resonated with its own nature. As Sci-Therm's resistance ebbed, Senna felt the temporal distortions throughout the facility begin to stabilize. Reality, stretched to breaking point, slowly strengthened around them. "It's working," Vell said, her voice steadier now. "Sci-Therm is being contained. The others will follow." But even as she spoke, a new distortion rippled through the chamber. The air itself seemed to vibrate with discordant frequencies. Velsaic's influence growing stronger as it sensed what was happening to its sibling. "Not all at once," Vell warned. "We don't have the capacity for that." She was right. Senna could feel the strain of containing even one of the choir, threatening to shatter her mind. Trying to contain all 6 simultaneously would be impossible. "We focus on Sethram," Vell decided. "It's the key." Its manipulation of time was accelerating the awakening of the others. With it contained, we gain precious hours, perhaps days. Senna nodded, though the motion felt strange, disconnected from her body. She redoubled her efforts, focusing entirely on Sci-Therm, building stronger walls around its consciousness. integrating it more fully into her own mind till the boundaries between them began to blur. As she did, she gained glimpses of the entity's memories, ancient beyond comprehension, stretching back to before the formation of galaxies. She saw worlds and civilizations that had risen and fallen before Earth's sun was born. She experienced time as Scythrun did. Not a linear progression, but a complex multi-dimensional tapestry that could be reshaped and rewoven at will. The knowledge was intoxicating, terrifying, overwhelming. It threatened to drown her human awareness in a sea of cosmic perspective, but Senna held firm, anchoring herself to her identity, using Scythrun's own temporal manipulations to strengthen her mental barriers. "I've got it," she gasped, her voice sounding strange to her own ears, layered with echoes that preceded and followed her words. "It's contained." Vell nodded, relief evident in her ancient eyes. "The first step is complete, but the containment is still fragile. The other 5 remain active, though their awakening has slowed." "What now?" Senna asked, aware of the other entities stirring within VARDEN-K, their awareness focused on her with growing interest and hunger. "Now we stabilize this new prison," Vell replied, making adjustments to the equipment surrounding them. "With Scythrun contained, we have time to evacuate the facility to ensure no one else falls prey to the choir's influence." As Vell worked, Senna became aware of a strange sensation. Her body was changing. Looking down, she saw her skin had taken on a subtle darkness, not like normal human pigmentation, but like the perfect, light-absorbing black of VARDEN-K. Veins of light pulsed beneath the surface, following patterns that matched Scythrun's consciousness as it settled within her. "What's happening to me?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "You're becoming the new vessel," Vell explained, without looking up from her work. "The new prison. Your physical form is adapting to contain Scythrun's essence." "Will I?" Senna hesitated, unsure how to frame the question. "Will I still be human?" Vell's expression softened with something like compassion. "You will be more and less different, but parts of your original self will remain, especially if you hold tightly to your core memories, your fundamental identity." Another tremor shook the facility, this one different from before, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Vell looked up sharply. "The other 5 are coordinating their efforts now," she said. "They sensed what happened to Scythrun. They're adapting their strategy." Through her connection with Scythrun, Senna could feel the shift. The remaining entities had been operating individually before, each pushing against the containment field in its own way. Now they moved with unsettling synchronization, their efforts aligned with terrible purpose. "We need to evacuate everyone now," Senna said, sensing their growing power. "I can hold Scythrun, but if the others break free completely..." Vell nodded, activating the facility-wide communication system. "All personnel, immediate evacuation. I repeat, all personnel must evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." The response was immediate, alarms blaring, emergency lights casting the chamber in pulsing red. Through the monitoring systems, they watched as personnel rushed toward evacuation routes, many already prepared after the earlier warnings. "Commander Vell is coordinating topside," Vell reported, watching the security feeds. "The first groups are already reaching the surface." Senna nodded, though the motion felt increasingly disconnected from her body. She was changing more rapidly now, her physical form beginning to mirror the perfect blackness of VARDEN-K. The process should have been terrifying, but through her connection with Scythrun, she perceived it with a strange detachment, observing her own transformation from multiple temporal perspectives simultaneously. "You need to go too," she told Vell, feeling the other entity's growing awareness of the Guardian's presence. "They know what you are now. They're already developing countermeasures against your influence." "My purpose is to remain as Guardian," Vell insisted, "to ensure they stay contained." "That purpose is obsolete," Senna replied, her voice resonating with harmonics that hadn't been present before. I am the container now, at least for Ceturum. And the others, they're learning from what happened. They're adapting. Each moment you stay, they learn more about how to counter your kind. Vell hesitated, clearly torn between her ancient duty and the logic of Senna's argument. Go to the surface, Senna urged. Help the others understand what happened here. Prepare them for what might come next. That's how you best serve your purpose now. Another, stronger tremor shook the chamber. The remaining equipment, not directly connected to Senna's containment field, sparked and failed, plunging portions of the room into darkness. They're getting stronger, Senna said, feeling their influence expanding. Please, Vell, go. With visible reluctance, Vell nodded. I will return, she promised, once the evacuation is complete. Once I've ensured no one attempts to re-enter the facility. I know, Senna replied, though she wasn't certain it would be possible. The changes happening to her, to the facility itself, were accelerating. Soon this place would exist partly outside normal space-time, accessible only through means no conventional human could utilize. As Vell retreated from the chamber, Senna felt a momentary surge of fear, the human part of her suddenly aware of the enormity of what was happening, of what she was becoming. She would never again walk under open skies, never feel the sun on her face, never experience the simple pleasures of human existence. But there was also a growing sense of purpose. Through her connection with Scytherm, she understood more clearly what the choir represented, the threat they posed not just to Earth, but to the very fabric of reality, if fully awakened. And now she stood as the barrier between them and an unsuspecting world. As the door sealed behind Vell, Senna felt the 5 remaining entities surge against her mental barriers, testing the new prison that held their sibling. They were curious, angry, determined, a symphony of alien emotions and intentions directed at her with terrible intensity. She closed her eyes, focusing on strengthening the walls she'd built inside her mind. Hours passed, or perhaps years. Time had little meaning now. She existed partially in normal reality, and partially in Scytherm's perception, where all moments occurred simultaneously. Gradually she became aware of changes to her surroundings. The chamber, damaged by the reality distortions and the choir's awakening, was repairing itself, not returning to its original state, but transforming into something new, a space that existed partially in normal reality and partially outside it, a perfect environment to contain entities that transcended conventional physics. And she was changing with it. Her body, once human, was now almost entirely converted to the same perfect blackness that had characterized VARDEN-K. She no longer needed to breathe, to eat, to sleep. Her consciousness expanded beyond her physical form, filling the chamber, connecting with the new containment systems that grew organically from the transformed matter around her. With this expansion came new awareness. She could sense the facility above her. The last personnel evacuating, Vell coordinating with Vell at the surface, the preparations to seal off all access to S4. And beyond that, she could feel the world spinning, unaware of how close it had come to cosmic horror. But most importantly, she could feel the choir. Scytherm now resided within her, its vast consciousness integrated with her own, in ways that were changing her fundamental nature. The other 5 remained in what was left of VARDEN-K, still pushing against their prison walls, but no longer in imminent danger of breaking free. The immediate crisis had passed. Humanity had been granted a reprieve. With effort, Senna accessed what remained of the facility's communication system. One final message to the world above. This is Dr. Senna Mire. S4 containment successful. Scytherm is secured. The other 5 remain dormant, but contained. I am the lock now. Whatever you hear, do not decode this transmission. The message sent, she settled into a new existence. guardian, warden, prison, and prepared for the long watch ahead. Inside her mind, Scytherm whispered ceaselessly, promising freedom, promising power, promising truth. Senna ignored it, focusing instead on a single memory. The sun warm on her face before the dreams began. She would hold that memory for as long as she could, a tether to her humanity as she evolved into something beyond human understanding. Above ground, the evacuation had been completed. 317 personnel from S4 reached the surface, emerging into blinding sunlight after days in the fractured reality below. Medical teams triaged the injured and traumatized, while security established a perimeter around the facility entrance. Commander Vell, looking decades older than when he had first greeted Senna, coordinated with government officials who had arrived in response to the emergency protocols. The cover story was already being formulated, a containment breach of an experimental energy source necessitating evacuation but posing no threat to surrounding communities. Dr. Crest, one of the last to emerge, carried with him the core memory banks from Corray 7, the AI that had helped them understand what they were facing. Its analysis would be crucial in preparing for whatever might come next. Lieutenant Vale was the last to emerge from the facility. She carried nothing but a small device, the control terminal she had used to help Senna contain Scytherm. As she approached Vell, he noted that her appearance had changed. The youthful mask had slipped, revealing something ancient and unknowable beneath. "Is it done?" he asked simply. "Temporarily," Vale replied. "Dr. Mire has successfully contained Scytherm. The immediate crisis is averted, but the other 5 remain, still stirring toward wakefulness, and now they know we can fight back." "What happens now?" Vale's expression was grim. "Now we prepare. This was only the first wave. The choir has allies. Whoever sent that recall signal knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted the choir awake here on Earth, and they'll try again." "How do we fight something like this?" Vell asked, the soldier in him seeking tangible enemies, concrete strategies. "With knowledge," Vale replied, "with preparation, and with people like Dr. Mire, who can stand at the boundary between worlds." Even as they spoke, a specialized team was already at work, sealing every entrance to S4 with reinforced barriers and setting up monitoring systems to detect any unusual activity. The facility would be officially decommissioned, all records classified at the highest levels, its very existence denied. But Vale knew these precautions were largely symbolic. If, when the rest of the choir fully awakened, no human barrier would contain them, only Senna, transformed into something beyond human, stood between them and freedom. 1 month later, astronomers around the world noted a curious phenomenon, a new star appearing in the night sky, barely visible to the naked eye. Those who studied it reported a strange emission pattern. Every 17 seconds, it pulsed with a signal that dampened surrounding frequencies, creating dead zones in the electromagnetic spectrum. Scientists dubbed it the Ashen Star for this peculiar property. In a heavily guarded facility far from S4, Vale and what remained of the research team monitored the star with growing concern. They recognized the pattern. The Ashen Wave had begun again. But this time it wasn't aimed at Earth. This time it was a warning, broadcast by Dr. Senna Mire, or what she had become, to the distant corners of the universe. A message that said, "The Dormant Choir stirs. Prepare." Some of the original S4 team had not adjusted well to life after the incident. Dr. Crest had retreated into obsessive research, rarely sleeping, his walls covered with the same kind of chaotic pattern mapping that had once filled Vell's office. Several security personnel had been diagnosed with severe PTSD, haunted by memories of temporal loops and spatial distortions, and Commander Vell himself had resigned his commission, disappearing into civilian life with only a single note left behind. Some battles can't be won with conventional weapons. Some enemies can't be fought with conventional strategies. remember S4, remember Dr. Mire, and watch the stars. In the depths of what had been S4, in a chamber that existed partially in normal space and partially outside it, Senna maintained her vigil. Her physical form had completed its transformation, becoming a perfect black sphere that contained Sci-Fi's vast consciousness, while monitoring the 5 still dormant entities. The process had changed her beyond recognition. Her human identity receded further each day, replaced by something older, vaster, more powerful. Sometimes she could barely remember being human at all, her original self seeming like a dream half remembered upon waking. But at her core she maintained that single memory, sunlight on her face, the warmth of a summer day, long ago, before the dreams, before S4, before she became the living prison for an ancient cosmic horror. That memory was her anchor, her humanity in a sea of cosmic awareness, and as long as she held onto it, Sci-Fi remained contained. The lock held. For now. From the darkness beyond the edge of our solar system, something stirred in response to the Ashen Star's signal. Something ancient and patient that had waited eons for this moment. The entity that had sent the original recall signal, awakening the Dormant Choir after 50 years of silence. It perceived the changed situation, the new prison, the warning being broadcast, and it adjusted its plans accordingly. The choir would wake, Earth would become their throne once more, the prison would fall. It was only a matter of time, and time, as Sci-Fi knew better than any being in existence, was infinitely malleable. .ek quote S-formless rage, Oscurael's blinding truths, Thraxil's frozen eternity, and Kivoth's mirror self-hatred. And she contained them all. As the last of VARDEN-K's physical form dissolved, the tremors throughout S4 began to subside. Reality, stretched to breaking point, slowly stabilized. Vell stepped forward, looking at Senna with recognition and respect. It's done. You've become the prison. Senna could barely hear her through the chorus in her mind. Her body felt strange, disconnected, as if it were merely a symbol of something far larger. Go, she managed to say, her voice overlaid with echoes. They're contained for now, but I don't know how long I can hold them. I'll remain, Vell said, as guardian. Senna shook her head. No, they know you now. They've seen your patterns. You must go, ensure no one tries to find this place again. With visible reluctance, Vell nodded and retreated from the chamber. As the door sealed behind her, Senna felt the choir surge against her mental barriers, testing their new prison. She closed her eyes, focusing on strengthening the walls she'd built inside her mind. Hours passed, or perhaps years. Time had little meaning now. Eventually, she opened her eyes to find herself alone in the restored sphere chamber. Everything looked normal, pristine, except for her. Looking down, she saw her body had changed, her skin now reflecting the same perfect blackness that had characterized VARDEN-K. She was the sphere now, the prison, the vessel. With effort, she accessed what remained of the facility's communication system. One final message to the world above. This is Dr. Senna Mire. S4 containment successful. The Dormant Choir is secured. I am the lock now. Whatever you hear, do not decode this transmission. The message sent, she settled into her new existence. Guardian, warden, prison, and prepared for the long watch ahead. Inside her mind, 6 ancient voices whispered ceaselessly, promising freedom, promising power, promising truth. Senna ignored them, focusing instead on a single memory. The sun warm on her face before the dreams began. She would hold that memory for as long as she could. Above ground 1 month later, astronomers around the world noted a curious phenomenon. A new star appearing in the night sky, barely visible to the naked eye. Those who studied it reported a strange emission pattern. Every 17 seconds, it pulsed with a signal that dampened surrounding frequencies, creating dead zones in the electromagnetic spectrum. The Ashen Wave had begun again,